This is a series of films that tells the history of contemporary fashion photography as seen through the eyes of models. So this is the next picture I'd like to talk to you about, Pat.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about who took this and what the session was like and the relationship between you and them.
Irving Penn, out of all people, you
Yeah.
know, he has that little setup where you walk into a box.
Right.
And
No, I
then-
don't know, because I was sadly was never photographed by Irving Penn.
Well, as it goes, that,
Yeah.
you know, this session, I was working with Halston.
Right,
And I was
yeah.
up at Vogue with Dinah Vreeland, and they decided that they had to have me because I was one of Halston's models. And,
Yeah.
and it was my first shooting, I think, up at Vogue.
Right.
And I was astonished that when I got there, that
Yeah.
I would meet this great artist.
Yeah.
Because I had been following him like the Bible, looking at Vogue and wondering, oh my God, those girls look so beautiful in that clean white background. How does he do that?
Yeah.
Well, I was satisfied. Walked into the clear white studio, and there was a cube sitting in the middle of the room, and I thought, what am I gonna do with that?
Yeah.
And he came into the room, and he was so cute. I mean, he was
Yeah.
really cute. He was very well, like he looked a little bit like his body was slim, he was
Yeah.
lean, and he was so agile looking, you know, he
Yeah.
looked very healthy looking.
Right.
And I thought, oh, this is Irving Penn, oh my goodness. So he was very quick.
All right.
And he said, now go sit in the box. I said, okay, I'll sit in the box. And he taught me to use my eyes.
Oh, really? Tell me.
Yeah,
What way?
because you look into the camera and you look at the camera and you think of the person that's in the camera, or the photographer who's
Yeah.
behind it. You're not really looking at the lens, you know?
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
looking at the person.
Yeah.
But he was so kind of animated in his, I could see his brain working.
Right.
Actually, I really tune in, you know, when I'm
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
And he was so wonderful because I knew that he could make something out of anyone.
Yeah.
And as I was sitting there, he said, okay, look in the wall and see a bug. And
Oh, really?
I looked over and I saw a bug. And he says, that's it. And I knew that was what he was trying to teach me, how to use my eyes. Because
Right.
he knew that the eyes are the soul.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And no matter which way you're looking, you're telling a story with your eyes, you
Yeah.
know? It could
Yeah,
be,
well, it's very, very true here.
yeah, and so he brought some drama into my eyes,
Yeah.
which were probably scared to death if I was looking at them like, oh, it's Irving Penn. But no, I was there and he made me feel really comfortable. And so I learned to sit quietly.
And was he, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I learned to sit quietly.
Right. Was he very chatty? Was he, what was his
No,
manner
he
like?
was a little bit upset sometimes, you know, because he was
Right.
doing so much Vogue. He just saw fashion. And so I remember we were down over near the library where the studio was
Yeah.
in New York on Fifth Avenue, a little bit towards 6th, and it was one of those beautiful studios. And in the breaks, we would sit together, and he'd say, sit with me, and we'd eat our salad or whatever it was, and
Yeah.
we'd be eating, and he would be sitting like close to me. And he always wore like a jacket.
Right.
You know, he was like that, but he'd say, I said, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? Oh, I'm tired of this fashion.
Right.
I said, well, what do you like? He says, I like flowers. You like flowers? I said to him, why don't you just photograph flowers?
Yeah.
And before you knew it, he left Vogue and he started photographing flowers.
Yeah, he did the most amazing flowers.
I gave him one of those elbow punches, like, do flowers, do what you love.
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
I got in there before he left. So I'm really happy, you know,
Yeah.
that I got to know him personally in that way. And when it was time for me to do my book sometime before,
Right.
and I had been working on my book for like a long time, and
Yeah.
I'd come into contact with Penn and everybody, you know,
Yeah,
when they're
yeah.
on the planet. I said, sure, use the pictures.
Yeah.
But then when I tried to put my book together, the community that owned the photographs sort of like, oh, well, who are you? Oh, that's me in the picture, you know.
And did they let you use the pictures?
Well, in the end, they understood the story of
Yeah.
our relationship.
Yeah,
that
they
was a
should.
good friendship.
Yeah.
And I had a good time getting that together because
Yeah.
he was one of the people, you know, that helped to launch me in the right way.
And when was this roughly?
That's 1969, 1970. Everything started stepping up for me in
Yeah.
1970. Yeah, that was the issue. No, that was 1969, but the issue came out in the beginning of 70.
Yeah. But you left America around that time.
I left in 1971 in the early part. I bought myself a first class ticket. I worked really hard to get that ticket because I knew I was going to go this chic way. And I drank champagne all the way because I knew I was going to be 21 soon. They didn't let you have it in America, but on the plane it was okay. And when I arrived in Paris, the boys came to pick me up. Ooh la la, Paris is happy and gay. They picked me up, took me to Antonio and started.
But you had a little bit of a moment, because I know that between leaving New York, you went to Italy first.
Wow, that was exciting.
Yeah,
I had to see all of those wonderful movies with riding around in Vespas and ladies in Grace Kelly scarves and tight skirts. And I thought, I'm going to go over and get some of that. And that was like going to be my first agency, but it wasn't all the thing that I thought it would be.
No.
And I write about it in my book because these are things that happen to young ladies that you have to watch out for, and you have to.
But it was very, from what you say, it's very close to being not good at all.
No, because you can run into a group of people that have absolutely nothing to do with fashion, but they try to pretend they're the wolf in sheep's clothing, and they say, come into my agency, but it's not all about what you think it's going to be.
Right.
And you have to listen to the voices inside of you when you see this is not exactly right.
But had you not, your American, Wilhelmina was your American agency, had they not arranged for an agency?
Not really, in those days.
Really, it was a bit sketchy?
Yeah, everything was a bit sketchy then. You know, like, people were not connected in the way they are with communications and transparency. And so then, you know, you kind of trust the people you know. And if people in that time weren't so internationally connected, as I said before, but they met someone that knew someone that said, oh, if you have some girls, please send them to me.
Right. But
and they were not, you know, it wasn't actually sauced out. And so I arrived at this agency, and it was just a bunch of playboys.
Really?
And I got tired of being pinched in the bottom or taken from one house party to another. And I said, this is not modeling.
No.
You know, this socializing and playboys. And why am I here? I said, where's the work? I'm a workaholic in a way, you know. If it's not work, I'm not going. You know, I don't need to be there. I can spend my time lying in a hammock somewhere. You know, I don't need to be there. You know?
But you, from what you say in your book, you nearly got abducted by sex slave traffickers.
Yeah, and you just didn't know, because once you see the drugs being passed around in a house, you know, I've seen a lot of girls go down like that since I owned a model agency. I saw girls disappearing into the anxiousness of being with wealthy men or trying to find a way to find a better life. And then they get involved with people who do drugs, and before you know it, they disappear. So if you see that happening, you have to say, ooh la la, this is not for me. Mama said there'd be days like this. There'd be days like this, Mama said. Listen to the songs, they'll warn you.
You use a lot of song lyrics in your thoughts.
Well, songs are in your soul. They teach you how to listen. You know, and you have to listen to your consciousness. You know, models are not stupid. They're business women, and they know how to handle situations. Traveling around the world, you get into a lot of scrapes.
And, you know, it's often the girls are young. So they're not particularly worldly wise.
No, they're just innocents, you know, and they go after the flash of light, and they don't realize they're like moths. They can burn up.
I'm sure it's better these days than it was sort of back in the 1970s, but I'm sure it's still just as dangerous.
No, they come from other countries, and they're anxious to meet people, and they get lost. Because I did own a model agency for 20 years in Italy, and I saw young girls coming in, like 13, 14 years old, without their mommies. I mean, who would let their daughter go to a totally different country without, you know, the chaperones? And I would send them home. Because I can't be responsible for their behavior. You have to be a little bit mature in your own self to understand this is business. And you have to conduct yourself with a sort of integrity that's expected of you. You know, you can't play around with people's time. And, you know, and your own time is very precious. Because there's only a window of success these days, this big. But in those days, it was not something that everyone knew about. Modeling was not a thing like, ooh, I want to be a model. You know, it's like, now it's like the grocery store. And then it was like, oh my God, I have to go to Tiffany's and get that yellow diamond. It's just a whole other concept now.
Because before this, you were making your own clothes, weren't you?
I had started as a designer because my mother and my auntie were at home creating all of these things, and I grew up with sequins on the floor and feathered boas hanging over the closet door and fox heads looking me in the night.
Because you, just sorry to interrupt, but your first time you appeared in Vogue was wearing your own clothes.
Yeah, because I went to school for design, and I thought I was going to be a designer, but my God, all that sewing just drove me crazy. But I did have the opportunity to make my appearance first in Vogue as a designer. As I had gone up, I was discovered by them first before I did anything in modeling. As I was walking through the subway one day, this lady had followed me, and she was English.
Right.
And she had a different point of view, I guess, on how fashion should look, but it was pre-mini skirt. Okay, and it was like before Twiggy came out and everything. And I had made this really wonderful houndstooth short mini skirt, and mini skirt now would look like a maxi with what they do today. But I was in the subway, had plaited spats, houndstooth spats with a zipper up the side, black patent leather shoes, mini skirt in heavy wool, and a little poplin raincoat. It looked really very mod in a way, you know. I was very mod in that period, and the music was in my head. I heard the Beatles and stuff, you know. And I was walking through in good posture, and I had very long hair, which I wore in a ponytail. And I was just happy with my girlfriend walking through the subway. In those days, we held our books in our arms, and this lady was following us, and my girlfriend said, "This person is following you, run, run." I said, "No, not run." When I looked around, I saw her. She was really elegant looking, and I stopped in my tracks, and I waited for her to come. And she said, "Oh my God, thank you for waiting for me, because I followed you all the way across town." And she was like out of breath, panting. And she was so glorious, and she spoke English, and I was just enchanted. I heard her accent. I said, "Oh my God, I'm almost in England." And she gave me her card, and it said Vogue, and then the golden light came out of the card like Charlie's Chocolate Factory, and it was like, woo. And I looked at it, and she said, "I'd like you to come up to Vogue and show us your clothing."
Right. So she was approaching you first of all as a designer, not as a model.
Yeah.
Right.
She said, "You look really nice." And I took my designs up to Vogue, to Carrie Donovan. She said, "I'm going to take these designs with me to Paris to show them to Givenchy." Well, I didn't hear for a while from her.
And sorry, Pat, to interrupt you again, but who was the lady that stopped you in the tube? Was that Carrie Donovan?
No, her name was Amanda. She was the assistant of Carrie Donovan.
Right, okay.
Because they had this thing called Vogue's Own Boutique. And what they would do is go out in the streets and scout for fashions of young people that were coming up. I think they still have things like that now, where young people, you know, when you express yourself, if you have the desire to be something or open doors, you have to first do it with yourself and believe in it yourself. And I so believed in what I was doing because I had a mother who loved sewing, my auntie who was always traveling around Europe, and they had this big desire to have this fashion house like Chanel, and they used to do drawings, and I said, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make it happen. You know, it wasn't like it just came out of nowhere. I was inspired by my mother and my auntie, who was a dancer with Catherine Dunham and traveled the world, and she used to make these beaded costumes for the opera, and they would sew and sew and sew, and then it kind of went into me, and I became like one thread. And I sort of wrapped myself around this dream, and I thought, I can make this happen. You know, I'm the new generation. You know, when you're young, you always want to make everything happen for your family, and you just like pop out like a chicken, and you say, oh, look, I have feathers, and I'm going to show off and make it happen. So that was my whole desire, is to please them.
And tell me a little bit about your family.
My mother is a painter. She's from Georgia in America. And in the time when she grew up, it was very difficult because she's African American mixed with everything else that we muddy Americans are mixed with, and part of Cherokee Indian. And she grew up in Georgia where it was difficult for women of color. And when she was a very young child, she used to draw those coins, those Indian head coins, and she found out she could do art. So she lived in this world in her head that art and beauty is everything. And then she moved north to New York, which was the Harlem Renaissance, and she made friends with all the jazz musicians. And when she was 15, it seems like history repeats itself, she won a scholarship to Pratt Institute. And she was one of the only women who, at 15, she was too young to go to Pratt, and she went. And she won, and there were only soldiers going at that time because it was during the Second World War.
Yeah.
So all the soldiers and my mom were in this Pratt Institute at 15 years old.
Yeah.
And then she painted the Harlem Renaissance and oil. She's a portrait artist.
Yeah.
And so I used to pose for her in the beginning. That's how I found that being with an artist is they endow you with their eyes, that they make you beautiful. And I felt so beautiful sitting with her in that silent moment, and I would see her so happy, peeking out from behind the easel, looking and doing what she loved to do best. And I realized in that moment, this is what it feels like. I knew something was magical in sitting with an artist.
Yeah.
And I used to fall asleep next to the easel when she was painting at night in the midnight, and she would paint drummers and African dancers, and I went to sleep with those visions in my head, and I would drink the Kool-Aid that was really the watercolor colors, and it was like I learned from her.
Right.
And she's a painter. She passed away last year. She was 89, but in her last moment she said, "You have to die to be famous as a painter." And I said, "Don't worry, Mom. You're dying. You're going to be famous."
And do you have her work?
I have all of her work. I curated, and it's going into the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
It's American Black history, and people need that. They need to know all the terrors, all the hardships, so that you can appreciate your life and now and move forward. And
was she very prolific as a painter?
Oh my God, she was excellent. I mean, she did Eartha Kitt, Josephine Baker, the women who went to outer space, the astronauts, political people, Joe, the boxers. She did everyone because they were her friends. You know, and so you paint the people you know and love, and those were her people.
Your father?
My father, oh my God, I'm still searching for him. He's probably passed away by now. But he was a jazz musician from Sweden, and he loved the saxophone. So they met in Harlem at a nightclub, and they had a 2-year romance. Right. And then he had to go back to Sweden.
Why?
Yeah, because his visa was up or something. Yeah, but he traveled a lot, and so I'm still trying to find his
You never found him?
No, but he came back, and he didn't know I was there.
Right.
And when he came back to see my mother again, I was 2 years old. I sat on his nice knee, and I met him. But then that was it, because he already had a family in Sweden. So he's up on the Instagram. If anybody can find my dad, Johnny Johansson, which is a common name there. I did the ancestry. I did the whole thing. And so I'm working on that now. But that's an adventure.
Brothers, sisters?
No, I'm an only child, because how many people can a single mom take care of?
Yeah, indeed.
I was just lucky, you know, to be there for her, and for her to be there for me. Because I really absorbed her.
Yeah, I can tell she's an important person in your whole life.
She's in my spirit right now. Everything I do is to honor her, to honor my grandmother, who was a slave, a Black American slave. And she went to Spelman College. She was one of the first Black women to graduate from a university. And she could do nothing with it. The opportunities were limited. Sure. So it kind of runs that kind of intelligence to improve yourself, to be conscious of your own talents. And so when the modeling came around, and it gave me beautiful opportunities to travel and meet the masters of fashion. Now, I was educated in stitching, you know, going into the cutting room, seeing the actual work. Now they have interns that do that, but at that time they didn't have that so much.
So we've got a long way from Mr. Penn.
Oh no, he's still in our hearts. He's still in our pictures.
And what did you call him? Did you call him Mr. Penn or Irving?
P.
P?
I give everybody a shortcut name, because you know that makes it endearing. Hi, come here, P. That's funny, we make a joke out of it. Oops.
Okay.
Because we both have P, you know, P and P.